Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat Parashat class, Parashat Vayakhel-Pekude, of course, a double Parashat to end the book of Shemot, also Parashat HaChodesh this week. And the question of the week is, what complementary ideas can we find about the Jewish woman in the Parasha of building the Mishkan? And the answer is plenty, believe it or not. I'll preface those findings in that presentation with saying something that unfortunately nowadays sounds political and controversial, but it's not. And that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the human race, the Homo sapien, that's what we are. And within the Homo sapien, there are two subspecies. One is called male and the other female. There are more technical scientific words for them. They are certainly two separate species. We say this again, not to be an affront to any type of current tendencies and discussions and verbiage that's going on in our society, rather as a praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is, it is stated by Hakamim and Hazal that it's amazing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created man as a single unit, and yet still he managed, with every duplication of man, never to duplicate them exactly. And we see this in a general way with the two subspecies of males and females, and that is that they are created in a very different manner. They have different amount and types of limbs and organs in their bodies. They function different chemically, hormonally. They, of course, those different physical functions in their body was different, generally speaking, different tendencies. And also because of that, there are, to some extent, different specific skill sets that men, both men and women respectively, have. Of course, with exceptions across the board. But recognizing those differences is not chauvinistic, is not humanistic, is not some type of bias at all. Rather, that is simply an absolute praise and high recognition of Borei Olam, of the Creator. It's tantamount to recognizing the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created billions of galaxies and planets and millions of species on planet Earth, subground, in the oceans and seas of planet Earth, beyond measure, each one of them with their own intricacies and amazing features. That in and of itself, acknowledging that truism, is a sheva, is a praise and recognition of our Maker, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, it behooves us at some junctures and settings to recognize the difference, at least the natural built-in differences between a man and a woman. That is a recognition of our Maker and Borei Olam. And I bring this up as I began mentioning that somehow our parasha or parashiyot that deal with the actual erecting and assembling and building of the Mishkan, Kadosh Baruch Hu chose to highlight some of the aspects of woman, subspecies that are actually elevated and more capable and more distinguished than man. And why is this the parasha of highlight and focus to some extent on women? And I would venture to say more than any other parasha in the Torah specifically. Well, if you're talking about the most holy activity in which Am Yisrael has ever engaged, which is, i.e., the Mishkan construction, the edifice, the house of God, so to speak, what better setting to highlight who is doing what and in what skillful and well-intended and wholehearted manner. So let's talk about three different examples which our Torah Kedosha highlights, generally speaking, the abilities and tendencies and skill sets of women that are, in these respects, greater than their counter subspecies man. And so we are in Parashat Vayakhel. All three examples will be in Vayakhel. The first two are on Perek Lamed chapter 35. And the first one, which we'll read in a moment, can be found in Pasuk Kaf Bet, verse 22, is immediately following the listing of the various vessels that Moshe has commanded Am Yisrael that they're going to eventually craft under the leadership of Bezalel, the head manager administrator of the Mishkan. And in doing so, it says that Am Yisrael, Pasuk Chaf, went out on the mission. All right, they were dispatched by Hashem. It's almost like you have instructions for some type of scavenger hunt or project, and you tell a bunch of people and you say go, and then they disperse and then they begin their mission. And so here is the actual activities, the actual let's say the actual footwork and the actual movement of Am Yisrael towards this great project. And Pasuk Kaf Aleph says that they began to do what? They began to donate. They began to pledge. They began to bring their raw materials. And there's great compliments regarding those who have. They were called and described as someone who's Nisa'ol Libo, Nadevaru Ho, which in and of itself are deserving of different discussions, but generally speaking, referring to people that are motivated for Hashem, people that are investing their heart and their soul in this great project. And then, so far, only discussing actual donations. The first discussion of specific types of unique vessels that are brought, Pasuk Kaf Bet represents us with a very interesting terminology. And here we read, Vayabo'u ha'anashim al hanashim. In discussing both women and men engaging in this great project and bringing their donations and the raw materials, it says, if you were to read this, which is not always a healthy practice, but in a literal translation of Hebrew to English, it sounds like, and the man came on the woman, like they're piggyback riding or something, right? And of course, it doesn't mean that. And were you to look, and just about all of the Mefarshim, the commentators that deal with the Pshat, the basic meaning from a grammatical and linguistic standpoint of these words, they explain the word al on here to mean aim with. And so just to restate that, and the men came with the woman, and then it goes on to list certain specific vessels, unique vessels. All those who are donating from the heart, and here it is. Let's not get into the specifics of that list, but get back to that term. So the basic implication, the men came with the woman, sounds like what? Sounds like the charge, sounds like the main motivation, sounds like the chief force was the woman. And in fact, the Ramban takes this to the next level. And the Ramban says, Vayabo ha'anashim al hanashim, means it's almost implying something lazy about the anashim. And that the women were at the forefront. And the woman moved with alacrity and with inspiration and motivation. And they brought all these non-requested vessels, personal vessels of their own. They were gold, they were valuable, they were precious, and they were at the forefront. And the men were like, wait for me, catching up. Vayabo ha'anashim al hanashim. The Ramban describes a scene where they were just tailgating the woman. That's all they were doing. And here we see a first description of something unique about, let's just say, the Jewish woman. And something that if you have ever experienced this, you'll know what I'm talking about. That when it comes to some type of virtuous involvement, some type of worthy ideal and practice, women have the tendency to be more motivated than men. They tend to be more active than men. They tend to naturally act with alacrity and with inspiration more than men do, right? That women naturally are driven to do something righteous and act upon it, not just think about it, quicker and with greater motivation and force than the Jewish man. This is certainly true with any mitzvot that they're presented an opportunity, chesed, acts of kind, loving kindness. That is across the board, you can say, something consistent about the nature of the Jewish woman, that given an equal opportunity to do something righteous and a command of God for men and women, they're moving quicker, they're moving with more motivation. Example number 2, we move only a few pesukim down the perek, and now after the initial donations, okay, well, besides Bezalel, who's the manager and the administrator, and some of his team, there had to be others who actually contribute to the handwork. It couldn't be one person doing all this work. And so where do we see the first active measure, not just of pledging and giving raw materials, but of actually taking part in the service and the construction and the crafting of materials, etc.? We see this in Pasuk Kaf He, just 3 Pesukim later, verse 25. V'chol isha hachmat lev beyadeha tavu. Now, the term hachmat lev we see in different forms 3 or 4 times in Parashat Vayakhel. It's something that I call intellectual intent, which is a nice discussion in and of itself, which refers to the fact that we act when we're doing things for the sake of God, not just with our skills and with our intellect, but we do it with intent and the sake of God. That combination is powerful, right? So that's the hachmat lev, so to speak, wisdom of the heart. But the act specifically is biyadeha tavu. With her hands, did she spin? One of the 39 melachot, prohibited acts on Shabbat, is toveh, which is when you have a blanket, so to speak, of material like wool that has already been cleaned, perhaps, and untangled. Now, in order to make it useful, you have to spin it into thread, whether the old days by hand or rudimentary machines, or today by more sophisticated machines. It's the same idea. You need thread, and with thread, you craft materials into different types of garments and the like. So someone had to do the spinning, and there they were. But the term is very interesting. Biyadeha tavu. With their hands did they spin. Now, what are you going to spin thread? With your nose? With your toes? Right? Why does it have to tell us with their hands did they spin? Further, you see, in the next pasuk, it says that continuation. We'll read the rest of the pasuk. Vayaviu matveh et hatecheres ve'et hadgamar ve'et tulat hashani ve'et hashesh. And it says they brought in their spinning activities, all type of different garments and types of material to work with. And then the next pasuk, very interestingly, pasuk kavav, v'kol hanashim asher nasa lebanotana bechokhmah, all women that were inspired to work with their skills, tavu ta'izim, which literally means they spun the goats. Not spun them around, spun the wool off the goats. And there's a Gemara brought down by Rashi that says there's a very unique skill that someone who knows how to can painlessly actually spin the thread, the wool, directly off the goat. And by doing so, you're much more efficient. You save a lot of extra thread that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And this is an incredible skill, and they were engaging this at the moment. Let's go back to that word, biyadeh. working with the hands. There's a great Arabic term that we have in our culture, in our community, that basically means working with your hands. And that term is shatra. When you say that, oh, this woman is shatra, it means she knows how to work with her hands, be it in this example, which means crafting materials and garments, but very often used regarding the skill, cooking, baking, making food and dessert, shatra, with her hands. Now, mind you, the fact that a woman is skillful working with her hands, yes, in the kitchen, does not preclude the possibility of her becoming a lawyer, a doctor, a therapist, and everything else. And there's nothing old-fashioned and antiquated about it. This is over and above anything that a woman could accomplish, naturally speaking, of course, with exceptions, current company included. There are plenty of men who know how to craft food very skillfully and daintily with their hands and other types of, but by and large, this is something that we've relied our mothers and grandmothers upon, not our fathers and grandfathers for, and that is being shatra, being able to work biyadeh. Tavu says the Torah emphatically, with her hands did she spin that thread. And she took that God-given ability and talent, those who had it more than others, and immediately invested it in the work of God with it. That's something that we're very proud of. Use that complimentary and descriptive term for our woman. Example number 2. But example number 3 is most definitely the most profound and powerful and most complimentary of the woman of our nation. And that will have to flip towards the end of Parashat Vayakhel. After Am Yisrael, with the leadership of Bezalel, crafted all of the various vessels for the sake of the Mishkan, at the end, there was one vessel left, or a pair of them. And that is the Kiyor Vechano, which was the wash basin and its faucets. And something very interesting that I'll preface this pasuk by telling you that the next parasha, which we'll read tomorrow as well, Pekude, begins with an accounting of the volume of the raw materials. How much gold, silver, and copper were used, and for what purposes? And there was a list. They were used to craft these vessels. And in that list regarding the copper, for the Nehoshet, the Torah states that they used that raw material for A, B, C, and D. What was not? I'm reading actually in Parashat Vayakhel, Perek Lamed chapter 38, Pasuk Kaftet, Poshet HaTenufa, the lifted, the donated copper, was Shiv'im Kikar. The next Pasuk, they made with it Adnei Petah Ohel Moed, Mizbach HaNehoshet, Michbar HaNehoshet, various the altar, accessories of the altar, the front beams around the courtyard. What is very distinctively and obviously missing? The kiyor and kano, the wash basin and the faucet, which are made out of copper. Now let's read this pasuk. So we're in Perek Lamed Het. We're in pasuk. Thank you. We're in pasuk Het, verse 8, and it says as follows: Vaya'as, this is referring to Bezalel and his helpers, et hakiyor nehoshet vet chano nehoshet. So he fashioned the laver, they call it, and the base of copper, using what? Well, it was made of copper. B'marot hasobeot asher sabeu beta oil moed. This is absolutely the most unusual ingredient of the Mishkan. Literally, it means with the mirrors, marot hasobeot, which is an absolutely mysterious term. Asher sabeu petach oil moed, which will say a sabah, like Hayaleh Sabah Haganah Yisrael, is an army, a gathering of people, a large amount, a congregation of people, in the opening of Ohel Moed, which the Mishkan didn't exist yet. So El Moed was the meeting tent between Moshe Rabbeinu and God. What is this exactly? Mirrors, we're assuming that they're made of copper, because it says Nehoshet here, and therefore they're metallic mirrors. But this was not named in the original of the original donated copper. and the materials with which was crafted from that copper. Rather, this seemingly was some type of extra donation, was something that was not requested and not expected and over and above and unique, and they were mirrors. So Rashi, based on the Midrash, has this whole presentation that there were mirrors in Misraim, that the woman helped motivated the men to be attracted to them and helped them procreate and continue multiplying and having generations of children. But the Mefarshim here, starting with Targum Unkelush, the Aramaic commentator, and Ibn Ezra, and Sforno, and the Ramban mentions them both, speak of a phenomenon that occurred. And that phenomenon, leading up to the days of the Mishkan, and of course, after Het HaEgel, saw not a few women, but as Ibn Ezra says, many, perhaps hundreds, perhaps thousands of women, Sabe'u, gathered, Petach Ohel Moed, to Moshe Rabbeinu's Beit Midrash, you can say. What did they do? These mar'ot, these mirrors, are something that we are told were discarded by these women. They were mar'ot, hasobeot, they used to look at themselves with, right? And they used, and some say sobeot is the verb that followed why they discarded the mirrors. In other words, they used it, that act of discarding mirrors, for the purpose of heightened spirituality. Now, women are expected to care about their looks, and that's fine, and that's natural, and the material aspect of a woman to have a desire to look nice is expected, and that's part of life. But at certain point, in certain periods of life, a person takes perspective and should, especially if they're growing in their spirituality and relationship to God, in terms of what priority is. And in this holy time, possibly the holiest time of our existence in the desert, post Matan Torah, leading up to building the Mishkan, our holy woman took toll of their life and perspective. And they said, these mirrors, the ones that we, so to speak, dress ourselves up with, it's really material when you think about it. It's somewhat nonsensical. Can't we do something better with them? And at a certain point, the movement emerged where women discarded and didn't really care about the material existence as much. And they spent, today would be the equivalent of going to classes, but it was far more profound. And that was going to the Ohel Moed of Moshe Rabbeinu to pray, the commentators tell us, to perform his work, to learn Torah, to take it all in. They traded in their mirrors. They traded in their materialism. They had what would be the most pure perspective on life in those moments, in those holy days, in order to build and foster a relationship with Hashem, in order to draw closer, in order to engage in tefillah and Torah and mizvah. It is those donated mirrors, after they discarded them, that were accepted with open arms and perhaps more lovingly than any of the other donations of the Mishkan, as they went against their nature in order to engage in spirituality. And this, we can say, is perhaps the most distinct and elevated tendency, potential ability of the Jewish woman. And that is, when it's going good, they're the best. And men can't even touch them in terms of their heights of spirituality. I can tell you this, not just being a husband and a father of 4 daughters. I can tell you this, humbly speaking, being a teacher of over 1,000 teenage girls in our community, that when they're good, they're the best. And given an opportunity and exposure, they can engage in spirituality in an unlimited manner and drive themselves towards reaching Borei Olam like male species can never hope to ever do. And that is the ultimate compliment. And that saved Parashat Vayakhel the best for last, in complimenting and describing the holiest woman of Am Yisrael in the holiest time of history of our nation. Amen. Amen. Shabbat shalom.